So thank you for joining us live today. As you know, this webinar is being hosted by us here at EURAXESS North America. Many of you are already familiar with us, but for those that are not, we will share a link in the chat to subscribe to our free flash note emails and social media channels. And this is where we send funding opportunities, in-person and virtual events, news, and more. So I'll open just by saying that this session is being recorded and we will share it afterwards along with the speaker presentations. And we'll be using the Q&A function here on Zoom to address any questions not covered by the presentations. We've also enabled the chat for other messages if there's any technical issues or things like that. But as a reminder, please do submit those questions in the Q&A box. And then as a separate reminder, earlier this year, we posted other webinars on the Skłodowska-Curie actions, specifically one on the postdoctoral fellowships or PF, and a separate one on finding a host institute for the PF. So today's is the third on this list, and it's quite timely considering that the call for the staff exchanges opened earlier this month. So like I said, many of you are already familiar with us. I want to quickly impart that EURAXESS is a project of the European Commission to promote the European Research Area, or ERA, and that is made up of the 27 EU member states and associated countries, creating a single borderless market for research, innovation, and technology across the EU. So we support researcher mobility and career development, and this includes by making connections between those who may not be going from North America to Europe or vice versa, but still want to expand their networks or partnerships. And all of our services are free and we tailor them to our audience. So please do reach out to let us know how we can help you. And I've just mentioned the European Research Area a moment ago, and I want to share with you a list of the EU member states and associated countries that are represented. So associated countries is a technical term meaning those nations that pay into the budget for EU research and innovation and therefore become a part of ERA. So when we say you can do a staff exchange from the US or Canada to Europe, these are the countries we're referring to. There are some technical aspects with certain countries that are still negotiating their association with Horizon Europe, which is the EU's current 7-year framework program for research and innovation that started last year. But all of these countries have EURAXESS national portals. So this is where you can use us at EURAXESS North America as a springboard to therefore get country-specific information and support for that nation of interest to you. So you can mark your calendars with the staff exchanges call deadline of March 8th of next year, and stay tuned to our events as we continue to give info and practical sessions on European funding schemes. And you can also connect with our great speakers today, who will continue to be very important points of contact for a lot of your inquiries. So my colleague who's in attendance today, Dr. Daria Butina-Karajan, and I are at your service. Please contact us using the email address you see on the screen. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out an automated follow-up email tomorrow with this recording and the speaker presentations, and you can reply to that email directly to reach us as well. And finally, you can scan this QR code here to sign up for our bi-monthly flash note emails. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Branwen Hyde and Anne Nirabish, who are both the UK National Contact Points, or NCPs, for the MSCA. Thank you so much for your in-depth guidance today.
Thank you very much, Jackson, for that kind introduction. I hope everybody can still hear me all right. I will do a quick full introduction once I get my slides going on. So hopefully, just bear with me for one moment, and I'm hoping that everybody can see those clearly now.
Yes.
Perfect. So as Jackson mentioned, today's session is really focusing on the staff exchange, one of the schemes within the Skłodowska-Curie actions, and we will go through how that fits in and to kind of the overarching Marie Curie landscape. And I'm joined today by my colleague Anne, who will also be helping. So I will focus a little bit more on the kind of overview of the scheme, the policies behind it, eligibility conditions, and then my colleague Anne will talk about other points for consideration when developing a proposal or talking to colleagues about collaboration within the guise of the staff exchange scheme and things such as also touching upon evaluation. We are here in our role as the Skłodowska-Curie National Contact Points, and we are part of a wide network. So all the member states and associated countries and also some third countries are all part of the NCP network for Marie Curie. But as we are UK NCPs, and as Jackson mentioned, not all of the countries have yet who are interested in participating in Horizon Europe have finalized their association, and the UK is one of those countries. Before I got started, I just wanted to cover that a little bit to explain the UK's relationship with the EU and how that particularly pertains to the call that we're here to talk about today. It won't take very long, and then we'll really focus on the call itself. But I do think it's important just to really explain how the UK can participate in this call. Now, many of you may or may not be aware, but in December of 2020, the negotiations between the UK and the EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement concluded. And as part of that negotiation, there was the announcement that confirmed the intention of the UK to associate to Horizon Europe. And that would, and it does include full participation in the program with a very small component, an exception under the EIC, that's European Innovation Council, and that has to do with investment funding element of the EIC accelerator call itself. So it's a very small element of which we are not able to participate. As part of, as being an associated country, the UK would be able to and can participate in and coordinate projects and receive funding from Horizon Europe for the lifetime of the project. And that includes the Marie Curie actions. And we also have a dedicated fact sheet and information on our UCRO portal, so the UK Research Office portal, if you've got any questions. As many of you may be aware, we have not yet finalized association, but the intention very much remains for the UK to finalize our association to Horizon Europe. Our ability to participate while we're still waiting for our association to finalize has been confirmed and reiterated by the European Commission. They have a dedicated Q&A, which clearly indicates that UK applicants are treated as if the UK is associated throughout the process from admission and eligibility to evaluation up until the point of preparation of the grant agreement. So for the context of this call and where we are now, we're talking about proposal, submission and evaluation, the UK is treated as if we are already associated. So what does this mean? It means that UK-based organizations and researchers, first of all, must be considered to be a beneficiary. That's the only way that we can be included in the proposals themselves. And I'll explain what we mean by some of these terms, beneficiary, coordinator, etc. for those of you who might be less familiar with European funding terminology. We can coordinate, i.e. we can lead a bid, lead a consortium. We, as part of the SAF exchange, we can send staff on secondments, and by we, I mean the UK-based organizations, and UK-based organizations can also host staff that are coming to them on secondments as well. There's also a dedicated page on the Marie Curie website as well, which directly links to the EC Q&A, effectively reiterating what I've just said and emphasizing that the UK can participate in this call as if it were an associated country already. So I hope that kind of clarifies the position of the UK. And I really now would like to focus on the SAF exchange scheme. You might pick up as we go through that though there are some can be a little complicated, as you see, in terms of how to arrange secondments. Actually, it's a really excellent scheme. And my own experience over the years with kind of precursors to the SAF exchange have been excellent. And those involved tend to get involved repeatedly because they see it as being a really good way to develop collaborations and long-term sustainable relationships. For those of you who might not be as familiar with Horizon Europe, I did want to quickly start with just kind of what we call the three-pillar structure. So a little bit of an overview of what Horizon looks like. Horizon Europe is kind of broken into three pillars. The first pillar really focuses on excellent science. It's kind of bottom-up fundamental research. We're looking at calls such as the European Research Council, the MSCA-SE actions, and also research infrastructures. The second pillar, more policy-driven, top-down types of funding opportunities for larger collaborative projects. And these are broken down into what we call clusters, which you'll see here are brought together of various subject areas to help address larger global and societal challenges. And then we have pillar 3, which really focuses on innovation. So just back to pillar 1, where Marie Curie sits, it's really about reinforcing and extending the excellence of the European Union's science base. Marie Curie, many framework programs ago, used to sit in a pillar called the people pillar. And people is still very important to Marie Curie. It is about developing relationships, building on networks, sustainable relationships, and about investing in the individual researchers and staff who are involved in research and innovation activities themselves. And you'll see this come through when I talk about the underlying policy for Marie Curie quite a lot. I do want to point out at the very bottom, we have widening participation and strengthening the European research area. These are kind of cross-cutting areas that cover a wide range of topics, which are also, for those of you who might be interested, also open to third country participation. And by third countries, we do mean the USA and Canada fit into that category. And they really are looking often at the holistic environment to which the research is undertaking, and could be quite a lot of interesting opportunities there as well. So Marie Curie, as I said, it's really about focusing on people and knowledge exchange and development. It operates on a bottom-up basis, and by this we mean any subject area. It's really up to the applicant to decide on the research area in question that they wish to focus on. Again, it covers everything from really basic research to very close and to near market uptake. So again, really whatever you are interested in. One of the key features of Marie Curie is what they call the 3I approach to mobility. That's interdisciplinarity, intersectoral, and international mobility. And these three really play a key part in the staff exchange call. It's about enhancing the skills of the people, as I mentioned, behind research and innovation. Marie Curie is also incredibly gender friendly and inclusive, and really do a lot to support equal opportunities in the research context. And there also is a strong emphasis on public engagement and dissemination, and particularly looking at things like public outreach. It's also really focusing on promoting long-term employability of the individuals behind, as I said, the research and innovation activities themselves. Just a few key figures. So these are figures I say obviously, but from Horizon 2020. As Horizon Europe has just started, we don't have any figures for that yet. But throughout Horizon 2020, Marie Curie supported over 65,000 researchers and staff members. Projects funded through Marie Curie produced more than 8,000 public-private peer-reviewed publications, produced more than 800 patent applications, and it supported more than 4,000 private organizations, of which more than 2,000 were what we call SMEs, small medium enterprises. So it's really a very inclusive scheme. And as I said, really all subject areas and, basic research and all the way through, we kind of say A to Z, archaeology, astronomy to zoology, and everything and anything in between, as I've said before. So it's really important when we're talking as well. Sometimes we use the terminology of science. In the European sense, science also includes kind of everything. It's really equivalent to saying research. So that does include arts and humanities and social sciences as well. So as I mentioned, we're here to talk about the staff exchange, which is about promoting innovative international, intersectoral, interdisciplinary collaboration and research and innovation. But it is just one of the Marie Curie actions. Jackson mentioned the postdoctoral fellowships, but there are also other schemes such as doctoral networks, the co-fund, and MSCA and citizens. And if you're interested in any of those other schemes, obviously Jackson Daria would be our first point of contact. But as NCPs, we're also very happy to help with any queries that you might have. So staff exchange, why we're here today. So just to get a few of the practicalities out of the way, as Jackson mentioned, the call has opened. The deadline is in March, so you do have time to prepare and develop a good proposal. But I will say it takes a bit of time, so I wouldn't wait until kind of February. I would really start thinking about developing and contacting potential collaborators now. The expected notification of applicants will be in June 2023 or thereabouts, with what we call the grant agreement signature. So the final signing off with the European Commission would be in November, and projects would be able to start anytime after November 2023, or effectively as soon as a grant agreement is signed. And it's really important to think about these dates. So the starting date of November, as I will explain, it is a 4-year project. And you will need to do planning of secondment. So it's important to kind of think about those timeframes when you are looking at your kind of secondment timeframe and who can go where and when. So staff exchange, as I mentioned, it is about collaborative research and innovation project. And that project is implemented through the undertaking of secondments. It's an excellent opportunity to and method and action to build new networks, but also to develop existing networks and collaborations that you might have, to expand those within the networks, or even just to strengthen the ties with those that you already work with on a regular basis. It's really about increasing your global cooperation, but also the collaboration between sectors. As I mentioned, that 3I approach, intersectoral mobility is really key, and you will see the important role that it has in staff exchange when I talk about the consortium composition. It's really about supporting the knowledge transfer between all those involved in the project and building long-term collaborations and supporting the long-term as well employability of the staff members who are involved in the secondments and helping them to develop the skills that they will need to achieve that. And as I mentioned, it encourages a 3I approach to mobility. As I mentioned, the project, it runs for 4 years. The funding is based on the number of person months. I will talk about the budget. So when we say the maximum duration is 4 years, and in terms of funding, it's 360 person months. So within that 4 years, you can have up to 360 person months of funding. And as I said, we'll go through the budget in a few slides. So before we get started about too many of the details, really, why should we get involved? And I think, as I said, I've really seen the benefits of these schemes in these areas. So we're talking about the staff members and the organizations, the staff members who go on secondment or work with the individuals who are being seconded to their organization, but also the organizations themselves. So those involved in the actual research and innovation activities, including the secondments, really help to develop their skills and competencies, help to really, as I said, there's a large link to intersectoral mobility, which will really help them develop this kind of entrepreneurial mindset, to think more creatively and innovatively about how they approach research and innovation questions and global challenges, enhance their networking and communication capabilities. It gives them a huge exposure internationally, and it helps them as individuals to build on their own networks and develop new collaborations as well. For the organizations, it really helps them to transfer knowledge and increase their research and innovation capacity, to help them as organizations develop and build their own sustainable international partnerships with partners all over the world. The nice thing about Staff Exchange, it really is very open. It is one of the most open schemes within Horizon 2020 and continues to be within Horizon Europe in terms of the support to work internationally and collaboratively. Really helps to build, as I already mentioned, intersectoral relationships. It can also be a really innovative way to develop cooperation and knowledge transfer between disciplines as well. So there's quite a lot of benefit from being involved. And this is why we see a lot of what we call repeat offenders, in the sense that they've applied for one, they've seen the benefit, and then they just kind of keep applying for the other. So it's a really good stepping stone. If you're thinking you're wanting to apply for some of those collaborative projects in Pillar 2 and 3, this is a really good stepping stone to help and develop those sustainable relationships and collaborations to go forth for those larger collaborative projects. So now into the nitty gritty. So what do we need to be eligible now that we understand a little bit more about the scheme and what it entails? So there are some very specific eligibility criteria. First of all, it's important to understand that any legal entity established in an academic or non-academic sector is eligible to apply. And what we mean by, I've included the definitions from the Commission on the slide here of academic sector and non-academic sector. I think often the academic sector is quite easy to understand in terms of the EC, the Commission. What they accept as non-academic is everything that's not academic. So that includes, NGOs, charities, policy organizations, government departments, SMEs, large industry, and everything and anything in between. And I'm sure I've missed many, many things out. So anything that is not an academic, considered to be an academic organization. That is determined by the Commission, so it's really important that you do check. Sometimes, and an example is often the museum. Some museums undertake quite a bit of research and are actually classified as research organizations, whereas other museums, because of their remit, would be considered to be a non-academic sector organization. So it's really important that you do check with the organization themselves and not make any assumptions about their status. So you're a legal entity in an academic or non-academic sector. So what do you need to ensure that your consortium is eligible? You need to have at least 3 different legal entities established in 3 different countries. Of those 3, 2 of which must be based in different EU member states or associated countries. So for example, you could have France, the UK, and the USA, or France, England, and Canada. That would meet the minimum criteria. That would be absolutely fine. If all of those organizations are from the same sector, so by this I mean if all of those the 3 legal entities are, say, in the non-academic sector, then one of those must be from a 3rd country. It doesn't mean that you, even if they were not all in the same sector, that you couldn't include third country participants. But if you have all the same sector within those 3 different legal entities from 3 different countries, then at least one must be from a third country. And this is checked as part of the eligibility check and after the submission. And unfortunately, if you do not meet that criteria, then your proposal would not be evaluated. And this is just to kind of give you a little bit of a visual of what we mean by that. So I won't go through it, but you will get to see the slides, and I think it'll help you to put this together a little bit more. I've also got some examples of funded projects will help you to visualize the consortium composition as well. When we're talking about consortium composition, we often get questions, how many is the right size of project? There is no typical consortium size. It's really based on the need of your individual research and innovation project. And it can range from the minimum of 3, and we've seen more to projects that have more than 20 organizations involved. The recommendation is between 6 and 10 because that's more manageable. If you are going to go for a larger project, 10 plus, as it were, a 20 plus, then it's something that you need to be considerate of how you will manage all the secondments, which I'll talk about in a second, because as I said, it is about doing research, implement the R&I activities are implemented through the secondments themselves. In terms of the consortium, you have 2 types of partners and types of participants. So we've talked about the sectors, academic and non-academic, but then we have 2 types. We can be a beneficiary or an associated partner. A beneficiary is an organization, so a legal entity established in an EU member state or an associated country. An associated partner, and I realize they're very close in terminology, associate partner, associate country, but associated partner, those are legal entities that are established in a third country. So in this instance, for example, that would be the US or Canada. If you are a legal entity established in the USA or Canada, then you can only be included as an associated partner. There are some differences, but the differences really relate to the funding and what can and cannot be funded from the EC. As an associated partner or a beneficiary, you can send staff on secondment, and you can also host staff who are coming to you who've been seconded from other legal entities within your consortium. You can provide other training opportunities, be involved in management structures, be involved in advisory committees, and it's really very limited difference, but there is a big difference with regards to the funding, and I'll explain that as we go ahead. One of the key things, as I said, it's all about the needs of your individual project. So one of the other questions we get is about associated partner. And again, there's no limit or expectation of how many associated partners you may or may not have. But again, they should be reasonable and in line with the project size. And in the examples that I have, you will see that it really does vary according to the need of the individual project. So I mentioned secondments and the different kind of rules related to funding, depending on whether you're an associated country or a member state or an associated partner or a member state or associated country. And when I'm talking about differences here, I did say it's really about funding. And by funding, I mean funding from the European Commission. So third country participants, so associated partners from low to middle income countries are automatically eligible for EC funding. Other third country participants, and this would include the US and Canada, would need to provide their own funding to support their seconded staff or their staff going on secondment. And there is in some countries, and I believe Canada and possibly the US are, but I know Canada does have some national funding that would support their involvement in Horizon Europe. And I would encourage you to have a look into that. And that's probably something that Jackson and Dariak would be able to help you to identify as well. So this is, I've realized, possibly a little bit of a tricky slide here, but it's really just to indicate the funding from the EC. The 1/3 relates to those secondments that are within the same sector. So it is possible, the same discipline. So within the same discipline, you can have up to 1/3, let me repeat, it's been a very long day. So within the same sector, you can have interdisciplinary secondments up to 1/3 of those. So for example, if you are an academic organization sending to another academic organization, that is fine, provided that they are interdisciplinary and that doesn't reach more than 1/3 of the total number of person months to which you will be claiming. Remember that the maximum number of person months that can be claimed is 360. And that's the same for both academic to academic or non-academic to non-academic. This rule about interdisciplinarity does not apply to secondments to or from organizations based in a third country, i.e. does not apply when you're going from a beneficiary or a member to an associated partner. Associated partners cannot second to each other. That's unfortunately not within the rules, and it would not be funded as well, even if you were a third country eligible for EC funding, as indicated by the big X on the lower right-hand corner. So I will talk a bit more about the secondments themselves, because as I said, it's a really important and the key feature of the staff exchange. And the secondments themselves must last between 1 and 12 months. So, and by 1 month is 30 days, regardless of how many days are actually in that a month. So the minimum secondment length is 30 days, and it is counted from the day of departure to the day of return. And I emphasize that because my experience, for some reason, it's very easy to get to 28 or 29 days, and often very difficult to get to 30. And partly because we often tend to forget to include travel days. So it's really important to understand that travel days are included when you are counting the duration of the secondment themselves. At least 1 month, so at least 30 days must be completed, after which the funding is pro rata for the number of days in the following month. And I said I will go through the funding as well. The secondment may be split into several days, so it might be difficult to spend an entire month on secondment or 3 months on secondment, or up to 12. And you can split that either across different beneficiaries or associated partners, or just different periods of time at the same beneficiary or associated partner. And I have a slide that explains that after this one. While you're on secondment, the staff member must work full-time, even if they would normally work part-time. And there is this inbuilt exchange mechanism. As I mentioned, knowledge exchange is really important, and that is carried out through these kind of return mechanisms, i.e. the seconded staff must come back or somehow transfer that knowledge back. And just to kind of reiterate and explain the secondment eligibility again, for EC funding, I've just included that in the box. We get a lot of questions. This is where I realize it does get a little bit more confusing. So this is where I mentioned about the split secondment. So you still need to respect the overall maximum and minimum duration. And the secondments must still occur within the total duration, so that 4 years maximum of the project itself. And at least 1 month must be completed minimum, and after which it can be a pro rata amount. So this is your staff member who spends 3 months at beneficiary A, and then 6 months at a third country partner A, and then he goes back to beneficiary A. Equally, this could all be beneficiary A, and he could spend 3 months there, then 6 months, and then 1 month over the course of the 5-year period. That would also be absolutely acceptable. And it's really about making sure you don't exceed the 12-month maximum. In addition to there being specific rules about the secondments themselves, there are also some eligibility conditions that the staff going on the secondments must also meet. The first one being is they must be under the direction and instruction of the sending organization. And that's a bit of a weird wording, but actually one of the nice things is that they're quite open on what a staff member is. We call them staff members specifically in the scheme. And because they are generally staff, but under an employment contract or some other equivalency, an equivalent contract. And this is why it's important that whatever that contract that you have in place with the person that you are sending on the secondment, is that during that secondment, they are under your direction and instruction, so they can do the activities that they're supposed to undertake while on the secondment. And you can make sure that that actually is completed as outlined in your proposal and in the grant agreement. So the grant agreement is a legal document that comes into force, that effectively your proposal turned into a legal document that stipulates the activities that you must undertake. They must be actively engaged in or linked to research and innovation activities at the sending organization for at least 1 month prior to the first secondment. For those who work part-time, that would be the pro rata amount. And they need to have the appropriate experience to undertake the activities. And as I already said, they need to work full-time. So who are staff? These could be PhD students by virtue of being enrolled in the graduate school. That is considered to be kind of equivalent to a employment contract, is enough equivalency. They will be under your direction and instruction while they're at the receiving host organization. It also includes technical staff, research assistants, postdoctoral researchers, senior researchers, managerial and administrative staff, and any other kind of staff that might be required for your project. Master students, we get a lot of questions about them. I will say it really depends on what the ask is, i.e. the types of activities and experience that they already have. This is something that you would need to discuss with your European project officer during project implementation. So I would discourage you from actively at the proposal stage stating that you would be sending master students. Because it would need to be approved by the project officer and it would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, but it'd be absolutely fine to send PhD students. The rationale is that often the master students wouldn't have the necessary experience and to undertake the activities because it's still often considered to be a training role, more of a student role than at the PhD level. So the funding, I keep mentioning funding and this EC maximum of 360 person months. So the funding for Marie Curie is quite simple. It's all based on unit costs. And they stipulate the unit cost amount, and then you multiply that by the number of person months that you've spent on the secondment. So it's quite simple. For those of you who have maybe been involved in collaborative projects, you'll be happy to know there's no detailed financial reporting. For those of you who have just started, you also might be happy to find out there's no detailed financial reporting. The financial reports are all done based on the number of completed secondment months, which you do in the portal. By the portal, this is kind of where you do all your reporting and look after your project while it's up and running. So it is quite simple in terms of how you do the financial reporting, and reporting in general. Marie Curie is quite straightforward. So per unit, so per person month, we have a total amount of, and this is all in euros, 4,600 euros. And that is broken down into 3 different cost categories. The staff member unit cost of 2,300, the research, training and networking costs of 1,300, and the management and indirect costs. We have, as I said, we'll be calling them staff, and it's all deliberate for many reasons. And one of which is the fact that there is the expectation that they will continue to have their salary while they're on secondment. So the funding provided by the staff exchange is not there to replace salary costs. It is there to supplement and help to and contribute to the cost of going on secondment. That's what the staff member unit cost is. So it covers things like the travel costs of going on secondment. While on secondment, any other additional travel costs that they might have, their accommodation, subsistence, those types of activities. The staff member must get the full 2,300. So if at the end of the secondments, you've found that there is an underspend, then that would need to be adjusted to ensure that they do have that full amount. And how you give that to them really varies. So some organizations are able to provide upfront funding, so pay the full amount to them. Others will claim back on receipts through their normal standard practice, and both options are absolutely fine. The research, training and networking costs is 1,300, and that's to cover research training activities, networking activities while on secondment, but also can be used for other activities while they're kind of not on secondment, but the funding is linked to the secondment. So it's really important to ensure that the secondments are done. And the management indirect costs is the funding is there to cover or contribute to the costs that the host organization has as a result of supporting the secondment, of having that seconded staff member within the organization. So this is the EC contribution. The EC contribution directly goes to the beneficiary or to those third country that are eligible to receive funding. So what about those third country that are not eligible to receive EC funding, who would like to support staff and have staff being seconded to them? If they are hosting staff that have been seconded to them from an EU member state or an associated country, i.e. a beneficiary, then this funding that I'm talking about here would be transferred to you as an organization to support your costs of hosting that researcher. So while that researcher is working on your premises, they will have research and training and networking costs, and they will have up to 1,300 spent on those research and networking costs while they're at your host organization. You will also incur some costs with regards to hosting them, and then you'll have some maybe receive part or all of the management and indirect costs to help offset your costs of supporting them. How that works, so the mechanism of which you would receive that funding and how much really is between you as the host, the secondment host organization, and the sending organization. And it's really important to have those conversations up front so that you really do understand how much or how little funding you would be receiving and the mechanisms by which you would be getting that. Some pay up front, some would be based back on invoice payment. So it's really important to have those discussions as soon as possible. Actually, I think it's really, really important. We see a lot of problems when those discussions haven't happened, and then people have different expectations and it can cause conflict during project implementation. Just to say that the management indirect costs, I do say 1,000, but in actual fact, the coordinator will top slice this to help cover network-wide activities and to usually pay for a project manager. So none of the beneficiaries tend to have access to the full 1,000. It's usually, we see everything from coordinators are requesting kind of 20 to 30% to almost 100%, and everything in between. So it's really good that that is discussed as a consortium early on while you're developing the proposal. So just to kind of recap a little bit about why, kind of going back to this question of why staff exchange, what are the benefits in being involved? And as a third country who wouldn't be eligible for funding if they wanted to send staff on secondment, why would you want to get involved in this scheme? Well, you can, as I said, host secondments and get funding for those hosted secondments. You can send staff on secondment if you have your own funding available. You can provide training and other networking opportunities. You can contribute to advisory committees and project boards, and participate in network-wide activities, and participate as key stakeholder and end user groups, and provide background and other resources. And it can really help you build and consolidate your international collaborations and networks, not just those that you've already started, but also to build new sustainable relationships. And this is just to reiterate that there is no obligation for a third country associated partner to send their staff on secondment. It's really absolutely fine and very common for them just to accept seconded staff members. I will say this is a bit of practical information, which Anne might also mention as well. Letters of commitment. As an associated partner, you must provide a letter of commitment. These can often take time to get, depending on your institutional practice. In terms of sign off, it could be someone quite senior. They often will need plenty of time to sign the document. There are some guidelines given on the Marie Curie how-to page in the template proposal itself. And so I would really encourage, if you are going ahead and have decided to participate, that you start looking at this letter and getting it signed, in the procedures and policies that you need to follow internally in order for that to occur within a timely manner. I did say that I would provide some examples, and I think it's really important and to highlight how well Canadian and American partners have done within the RISE. So RISE is the Research and Innovation Staff Exchange scheme under Horizon 2020. It has been renamed Staff Exchange under Horizon Europe. So if you're looking at funded projects and they all say RISE, it's absolutely fine. It is Staff Exchange. The difference has to do with some of the definitions of secondment, and under the RISE, there was no same sector secondments allowed. So there's just been a few little changes. In terms of third country participation, Canada and the US are 2 and 1. So the US is kind of the most successful and high level participation in Staff Exchange, followed by Canada. And these are some numbers I thought were quite interesting. So Canada is participating institution. 64 different institutions across Canada are involved in over 219 projects. And in the US, 331 institutions are involved in more than 1,000 projects. And then here's just some numbers about on the right-hand side with regards to the researchers as well. So for the US, over 1,000 European researchers came to the US on exchange, and 174 US researchers themselves went on exchanges. For Canada, 61 European researchers came to Canada, and 59 Canadian researchers themselves went on exchange. So again, those are quite good numbers, and it really shows you a breadth the opportunities. You can find out more of this. The links will come up again on the following slides about funded projects, where you can kind of see a little bit more about projects that have US and Canadian participation. And I wanted to kind of highlight three. I did a very, very quick search on the Quartus website, which is a great resource for finding these funded projects, which is where the links to. And what I wanted to show is just kind of the real breadth in the consortium setup. So these are funded projects, and this project has finished. So the reason there's a difference between total cost and EU contribution. So the EU contribution is the funding that the EC provided. The total cost is the actual cost of the entire project themselves, which indicates that some of the third countries, so some of the associated partners, actually contributed their own funding to be involved in the project. So in this one, we see here the coordinator, but what I wanted to demonstrate is we've got a few beneficiaries from a number of member states, associated countries, we've got size 5 or 6, but the number of partners, so partners of the associated partners, is substantial and really reflecting the needs of the project. This project focused on energy, economics, and climate change. They supported more than 100 researchers who spent more than 500 months seconded at partner universities. The reason that is more than the 360 is there is also more person months available under Horizon 2020, but also the staff member that are being sent from the third countries are not included in that number of person months. So you can actually exceed the total number of person months when you start actually, when you count the secondments from the third country participants. This is another project really looking about the formation of, they actually developed an online encyclopedia looking at the formation of European forms of sociability in the in the 18th century. What you see here is we have a large number of participants, so these are the beneficiaries, and we only have 2 associated partners, and not to diminish it, but just again, it's a very different setup than the previous project. These are 2 institutions within Canada. Again, also demonstrating the breadth of the types of institutions that are involved. And then the last one, and you can see here that the third country, so in this case, Canada, didn't contribute any money. They really just received their own staff members being seconded from the beneficiaries, as you can see here, by the fact that the total cost is equal to the EEC contribution. And then the final project that I wanted to highlight, again, showing a very, very different setup. It's a very small project, really looked at the development of developing in vitro 3D disease models. And again, the third country involved did provide some funding that the total cost does exceed the EU contribution, but it's 3. It just meets the minimum consortium criteria. We have 3 different countries, 3 different legal entities based in 3 different countries. So again, you can really see that the size really depends on what is trying to be achieved from the project. For those of you who might be interested in some more great examples, these are actually provided as, these are considered to be success stories from the EC, and they also provide them, and I would encourage you to have a look at the Quartus results and see the project again, to kind of see the breadth of the projects that are being funded, and the same the size of those projects as well. So I will just touch upon a few guidance documents before handing over to Anne. So I want to talk about, very importantly, the MSc guidelines on supervision. The supervision is incredibly important for all MSCA Curie actions, including the staff exchange, ensuring that the researchers, while they're on secondment, are being looked after and supported and have appropriate supervision. And these guidelines really provide a non-exhaustive list of recommendations on how to achieve that. It's not a requirement, but it's really good to look and understand what Marie Curie is trying to achieve. And it has direct reference to this thing called the Marie Curie Green Charter, which is really a set of guiding principles to help raise awareness within Marie Curie and other funded researchers of issues related to kind of climate change, to help promote environmental issues, promote sustainable behaviors and policies. The Commission is developing additional guidance material. It's technically not part of the evaluation criteria, but in the proposal, as Anna mentioned, there is a section where this needs to be addressed. Kind of related to the guidelines for supervision is the need to have a good research environment. And that's also crucial for Marie Curie. And I've included 3 documents here. The first one is kind of more focused on kind of PhD level, so the training level, but actually has some very good examples and discussions about the need for sustainable research careers. And as I mentioned, MSCA-Curie is really about supporting long-term career employability. And then the European Charter and Code of Conduct for Recruitment are also two key documents for anyone thinking of applying for MSCA-Curie. And pretty much every application you will see them referenced, and they really do need to be directly referenced. So that's everything, kind of giving the overview of MSCA-Curie Staff Exchange, and I'll now hand off to my colleague Anne, who will go a little bit more into some of the details and particularly things like the evaluation criteria as well. So it's over to you, Anne.
Apologies, everyone. Just give me a moment to find the sharing function. Hopefully it has worked now. Okay, you can see it. Okay, awesome. So thank you very much, Bronwyn, for this kind introduction. Thank you very much, Jackson and Daria, for inviting me, or for inviting us, Bronwyn and myself. I will now be talking about the evaluation and other points for consideration in the MSCA-Curie staff exchanges. First of all, I would just like to start by basically taking you and starting at the beginning. So basically, I'm not interested in this call. What do I need to do? How can I proceed, to apply, to find partners, to develop a good proposal? So you can start on the application page for the MSCA-Curie Staff Exchange call. And I've provided the link here in my presentation. As Jackson has said, the recording and the slides will be circulated, so you can just click on the link and you will be taken directly to this web page. And on this call web page, you will find every single documentation you need for this call in order to be successful for this call. So there are no hidden documents. So basically, European Commission hasn't hidden any documents. Every single document which you might need, every reference document, including the submission links, is available on this website. What I find particularly interesting is that they've also provided the guidance for evaluators. So you can also have a look at how the evaluators will be instructed to evaluate the MSCA-Curie Staff Exchange proposal. If you would like to participate, you have to check whether your organization is registered on this portal, which is called the Funding and Tenders Opportunities portal. And again, I've provided here a link. I pretty much assume that all major American and Canadian institutions are registered on this portal, but again, I would encourage you to check with your research office, and they should be able to help. Again, not only academic institutions can register, but also SMEs, industry, charities, basically institutions from the non-academic sector are also invited to register. And again, if you click on this link, you will find more information. Applicants can also register to the portal, and on the right-hand side, you will see a register button. Just click on it and you will get further instruction on how to register. And just in case you're not interested not only in the staff exchange call, but also in other, collaborating further with European colleagues, all Horizon Europe calls are published on the same portal. So basically, if you're interested in European funding opportunities, this is the main portal for all these European funding opportunities funded by the European Commission. Then, this is the question we actually get asked a lot. How do I find partner? Where do I even start? I have provided you here with a compilation of links and advice, which we found useful in the past. So first of all, we would invite you to use the MSCA-Curie matchmaking platform. I provide more information on the next slide, so I'm not going to go into much detail on this. But then again, there's also a partner search function on the MSCA-Curie Staff Exchange call webpage. And this is really interesting because it allows you to find partners or publish your own advertisement. So if you think, okay, I would like to find a partner, but I don't even know who is interested, then you can go to this partner search function and check out, potential partners to collaborate with, or even potential competitors. You can use your own existing networks, or what we found also, what was really, what so very successful applicants have told us is that they've contacted potential partners proactively. And they contacted them and said, look, I'm interested in doing this awesome project, this awesome MSCA-Curie Staff Exchange project, and I would like to participate, or this is what I bring to the table. In this case, what I would advise you to do is to check your internet presence, to check whether it's up to date, and to be really clear on ensuring that everyone knows what you will be contributing to the project, what expertise you have, that you basically, they know your publications, etc., etc. Again, I would also encourage you to check previous projects for potential collaborators. I provided the link here on the slides. You will be taken to the Cordis website, which Bronwyn has mentioned in her presentation. And again, you will find, you can find potential collaborators, not only for this call, but also on the European continent and beyond. That said, a little bit more information on the Marie Curie matchmaking platform. The Marie Curie Net is a collaboration of Marie Curie NCPs. And they have worked tirelessly to basically build this platform, the link is below, so that you can publish your own AdWord, either to find potential partners, book meetings with potential partners, to look for partners in your research area in particular, etc., etc. And just to be clear here, this is not only for the Marie Curie Staff Exchange, this is also for all other Marie Curie calls. So if you're interested in the Marie Curie Postdoctoral Fellowship call or other calls, then this is the matchmaking platform you can go to and, I would say go speed dating. Here I present you with a list of questions which we found useful to ask from the beginning of your project. So once you start thinking, okay, I would really like to do this project, what do I need to think of? And the first question I would encourage you to think about is to be really clear on what do you hope to get out of a collaboration? So if you contact a specific person, the specific academic or the specific charity, what do you hope to get out of this collaboration? But also what will your partner get out of this collaboration? So if you contact them, think really about whether they will also get something out of them that would entice them to try to collaborate with you. Basically, will this project solve a problem for them? Or does this project have synergies to research the partners already working on? So I'm just taking time. And then you also need to think about whether your partner has any complementary knowledge or any specific research infrastructure, assets, etc., which would help you in your project. Something we've also found really useful is to clarify intellectual property rights and be really clear on who is leading the application. I will be providing you with further information in a second, actually on the next slide. This is about the consortium. So leading on from the, following up from the last slide, the consortium, as soon as possible, once basically you thought about this and once you found your partners, agree with them on the research project, agree with them on which sector each country is coming from, the status of the country, as Bronwyn has said, so beneficiary and associated country. Be really clear that you know about the funding rules and that you follow the funding rules. And then you can also think about, that is the most important part, your training, research and training needs. Are there specific opportunities? For example, does one partner have specific research infrastructure? You'd like to be seconded to, or you'd like to have something seconded to your institution because you have specific infrastructure, knowledge, skills, etc. And you'd like to collaborate with them on a project. You need to think about how each secondment fits into the overall project. You need to think about research, resources, supervision, and training provision. I would really strongly encourage you to think about the financial allocation, the budget, as early as possible. So don't really think about things like how will some of the institutional budget costs be used, etc. By the way, if you have any questions on that, we would welcome you to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we are happy to have an extended Q&A session with you following my presentation. Then you would also need to think about the governance and monitoring structure of the consortium. And what we found useful in the parts are the use of simple tables and Gantt charts. Proposal advice. Our general advice is, and I'll keep repeating this until I die, we would strongly encourage you to read all call application and evaluation criteria on the call webpage. Again, as I said before, there are no hidden guidance documents anywhere. All the documentation you need is on this call webpage, and it's very clear on the evaluation criteria. I'll talk about them in a moment. It's very clear on all the other aspects you need to think about for your application, etc. So everything is provided you on the call webpage. Then strongly follow the call requirements and please follow the proposal template. Don't invent your own. The European Commission has provided you with a proposal template. If you and your partners decide to work on a Marie Curie staff exchange proposal, follow this guidance. Then be in line with what the staff exchange is about. Then also describe the benefits of the cooperation. So basically, if you second researchers in your consortium, what are the benefits? What are the benefits for your research? What are the benefits for your international collaborations? How do they go beyond this project? For example, how would the inclusion of a non-academic partner benefit your project, and so on. The rest of the rest is basically the typical advice, which is for a proposal: make it easy for the evaluators to find information. So don't have them second guessing. Be really clear on what you want to do. Use very concise language. You can include diagrams, images, tables, and if appropriate, if you know if that adds to the readability of your project proposal. And what we found helpful, again, was to research previous and current proposals. And we found that successful applicants also asked colleagues to proofread the draft with the evaluation criteria in mind. Again, the evaluation criteria, I'll discuss them in a moment, but they are provided on the website, as well as the guidance the evaluators will be instructed to follow. Lastly, I think Bran already mentioned this, but just to re-emphasize, this is the call deadline. Important for you to know is that the call will close at the beginning of March. If you would like to participate in this call, again, I would very strongly encourage you to start looking for partners now. Don't start looking for partners in January, really start looking as early as possible. Use the information the advice I've given you previously to contact them, to discuss a potential proposal, to discuss a potential collaboration. But don't leave it until the last minute, because that is, let's put it this way, I don't think that this will be a very successful application. And again, I've provided you the link for the Marie Curie Staff Exchange call webpage. Okay, here's some support material. We have ACRO, also Bran and I, we are working as UK Marie NCPs for the UK, United Kingdom research office in Brussels. And we have also done a few webinars on the Staff Exchanges call and the CoFund call, which was opened. And if you're interested, just click on the links and you will take to the recording and the slides. Again, I understand that Jackson will be circulating the slides after this event. Some resources and an advice. If you are interested, in becoming involved in European funding or European funding opportunities, I would encourage you to check out this website on how to register as an expert for the European Commission, because they're always looking for experts in specific research fields. And A, you would get paid, and B, you would get exposure to how European research proposals are being evaluated by the, basically, you'd get first-hand exposure to evaluating European research proposals. Then I'm also going to very briefly touch on the evaluation criteria. I have provided you with the links to the evaluation criteria and the guidance for the evaluators at the, sorry, I'm always a bit with direction, at the right-hand corner. And but as you can see, there are three main criteria, which are excellent, impact, and the quality and efficiency of the implementation. And these evaluation criteria are weighted. I'm not going to go too much into detail on these criteria, but when you develop your proposal, it is really important to keep these criteria in mind, because this is what you will be evaluated on, and these criteria will be weighted as described. Again, all the information you need is on the slides. What we found in the past, and hence I will be discussing them in more detail now, is that first-time applicants, I don't know if you're first-time applicants, but I'm just going to assume for sake of simplicity that you are, that first-time applicants often get confused on some aspects like the gender dimension and diversity aspects and the open science practices. Hence, I will also now providing you with more information on those. So what does it mean to include a gender dimension in your Marie Curie proposal? European Commission basically has officially stated that the research should be for the benefit of society and should uplift diversity, women, etc., etc. So basically make sure that there's a more diverse society at the end. Hence, if you develop a proposal, a new proposal, but also in your case, a Marie Curie Staff Exchange proposal, you need to think about whether your research involves humans And if yes, you definitely have a gender dimension. That could be, for example, if you have a social survey, for example, how many women will you be contacting, etc. If you don't think that your research, if you think that your research doesn't involve humans or doesn't involve women, then that would also be fine, but you'd have to explain that this doesn't relate to your project. For example, there could be cases where you really have no gender dimension in your research, geology, some quantum chemistry equations probably. In this case, don't just leave it out, because the gender dimension of your research project will be evaluated under criterion excellence. Just to repeat this, because this is a really easy mistake to make. If you don't or have a limited gender dimension in your research, in your proposed research, don't leave it out. Just be really explicit in the proposal that you thought about this, you don't have a gender dimension, and you can think about other elements then, for example, communication, dissemination, exploitation, hiring more female staff, for example, if female researchers are underrepresented in your research area. You can think about your consortium composition, you can think about training young female researchers, etc. Again, I've provided you with some resources, and we'll now be going to the open access requirement. Again, this will be evaluated as part of the excellence criteria. And basically what the European Commission is trying to do here is to encourage open science, open access science. So once you do science financed by the European Commission, the science should be available to everyone so that your results can be replicated, that other researchers can use the results for their own research, etc. And basically, what you'd like to see is that there's an open access to scientific publications, an open access to the data you've used, an open access to the protocols, for example, your code if you have done coding, or the protocols for your biological experiments, etc. All research data must be managed in line with FAIR principles, which means that, for example, if you use me as an example, I should be able to go on the net and find them and be able to use them. And the data management plan is a standard deliverable in Marie Curie and Horizon Europe projects, in Marie Curie projects at least. Now you might think, especially if I've got SMEs or more industry-focused entities here in the room, well, I would like to exploit my results. Well, this is that the European Commission has this principle, as open as possible, as close as necessary. So if you want to exploit your results, that's fine. You can then work under this principle as close as necessary, but there should be some exploitation, there should be some use for society at the end of this project. And again, this has to be very clearly stated in your research proposal. So, sorry about my mouse. So last slides, I promise you, we are on the last slides, and then we have a very nice Q&A session. Dissemination, exploitation, and communication will be evaluated under the impact criterion. And I would like to note that at least in the UK, institutions often have a team that can help support you in, disseminating your research, exploiting your research, or communicating your research. It basically means the European Commission also hopes that you will further publicize and further use your results. We've often noted in the past that people are a bit confused about the difference between dissemination, exploitation, communication. Hence, I will be very briefly outlining the difference and then give you some further information. With dissemination basically means that you promote and raise awareness of your project results. So for example, you could give an interview, or you could have a website with your research results. You could go into schools and talk to children, but basically making society aware that you've done this research, how this research is useful for society, and basically why this is relevant, why you will do this. Also, hopefully encourage young people to become researchers themselves. Then you've got exploitation, which is that you can use the results, or that you should help to use these results for commercial purposes or in public policy making. It is basically, and it is being encouraged, it is strongly encouraged, because again, the European Commission hopes that by financing these kinds of research, the Marie Curie research, this has an impact not only in the research, but further for society. And communication is, again, public engagement. So, I'm aware of the time. Let me just quickly check the time. So I will not be going into detail on the slides, but again, you have the slides, and you will get the slides once Jackson sends them around. Sorry. So the expected impact. First of all, there are 3 impacts that are expected from research from the European Commission expects that basically have 3 impacts from your research or from research financed by the European Commission. Apologies, it's also been a long day for me. It's a scientific impact, societal impact, economic impact. However, depending on the project, depending on the research area, your project may address only one of these 3 expected impacts. But I still find it useful for you to know what these 3 impacts entail. The first impact is the scientific impact. Through your research, you're creating new knowledge. You are making sure that research in your research area advances, that there is new knowledge gained, other researchers can build for this. Society impact is that through your research, the EU can basically support their own policies. They can access policy priority areas. For example, it is a priority for the European Commission to have a greener Europe with less emissions, with better protection of the environment. Your research can contribute to this. And that's what you need to be clear on. Hey, by doing this research on, I don't know, policy, pollution and emission, on how to reduce reduction of emission and pollution, that's how I contribute to your policy goals. And the economic impact is through your research, you could also be creating new growth in industry, you could be creating jobs, you could be developing spin-offs, etc., etc. But this is basically something, this is just another impact that your research could have. It is not expected that it will have, but ideally, if it is, if you think your research will have this impact, and this is something you can mention, this is something you should mention and be really clear on. And that being said, I would like to thank you all for your time for listening to me. And I now need to find the stop sharing function. Sorry, sharing is still my Achilles heel, and I've worked in Zoom for how many years now?
Well, I want to thank you both so much for these excellent presentations. I know people tend to request access to the presentations because there's a lot of good information in them, especially clickable links. So thank you both for agreeing to share those with me. And as I've mentioned earlier in the chat, we will be updating the webpage probably later tonight, East Coast US time, but everyone will get an automated email with a link to the recording and your presentations by tomorrow. So keep an eye in your inbox about 24 hours now. To all attendees and then non-attendees who also registered alike for that information. So thank you both. I think you've given so much comprehensive information that I don't actually see any questions submitted to the Q&A box. What I will do is I will ask the attendee who shared a question in the chat box, if it's at all possible, to share it in the Q&A box, maybe just with a quick copy and paste. Unfortunately, Zoom doesn't let me is one of the hosts or speakers do that. But that way we'll also be able to export the question, put it in a report that Zoom can provide once the event's over, and I can sort of compile the questions and answers in a way that makes it more digestible after the fact for people to gather that information. So I'll take a moment to see if that pops up in the Q&A. If it doesn't, I can just read it out loud. And then I've already conferred with a few of you, both of you on this question, so we have some responses prepped up. And then I'm just trying to buy time so that audience members can chime in with some questions if they have it. So let me do 2 things right now. I will just read that question out loud and then get ready written response I have on my side, but I'll let you speak to it to that point. And then also I'm going to double check the questions during registration. I believe there was one question that had been submitted, and if it's relevant, I can also share that one. So someone asks in the chat, how is it possible to get information about US funds to cover the expenses of seconding a US researcher? So Bronwyn and Ann have been kind enough to me to provide links to both, which I'll share in just a moment in the chat, to the European Commission's Director General for Research and Innovation country-specific page to the United States, which lists sort of an exhaustive list of scheme-specific resources. To my knowledge, a quick scan of this makes me think that for previously RISE and now staff exchanges, there is no specific US funding for this call. There are for several other funding schemes, both within MSCA and with other programs like the European Research Council grants, but I'll share that link in just a moment. And then there's also a very handy PDF for third countries. I think at this point, it's about 10 countries or so that are listed. And there's comprehensive resources on Canadian funds that are available, but the US is not listed in that document. So I think for the purpose of staff exchanges, unless Bronwyn or Anne want to elaborate, I'm not aware of any US specific funds. I will also take this moment though, in the links that I'm about to include in the chat, just to reference a Washington, DC institution that covers all of the US, but then also provides support services to academic institutions all over the world, called NCPs, the National Council of University Research Administrators. And they are, you could say, an authority on US funding. So in this case, you could contact them directly. I'll do it for my own personal knowledge, and I can follow up with the person asking this question on any potential funds that may not be widely known for staff exchanges coming from the US. But that said, NCPs would be a great resource to ask this type of question in the future as well. So thank you, Bronwyn and Anne. Let me just share these links that you've provided to me in the chat, as well as a link to NCPs.
So I'll just, while you're doing that, I'll just say, yes,
please.
At the moment, we're not aware of specific funding from the US for the staff exchange. But it's also worth noting that there might be things out there so it's always worth asking. So for example, for collaborative projects under cluster 1, which is health, the NSF does, the National Science Foundation does have some a reciprocal agreement where the UK can participate in that, and they have that under Horizon 2020, and they have that under Horizon Europe. So there might be some specific pots of money depending on your subject area. But also just a reminder that it's your money, you're coming, so there's no limitations on the Commission as to where that funding comes from. So if you have an existing grant that does have funding available for travel and subsistence and for secondment, that type of activities, knowledge exchange, then you could utilize that, provided it's all right for the other funder effectively. So it can be quite flexible, and where that funding comes from. You also might find that your department and institution has a small budget to support these types of activities. Many big universities do have international teams, so departments that support international engagement, and it's probably worth talking to them. They might have some funding available to help support some secondments if you're wanting to send people. But as I said, you don't have to send people on secondment. You can receive people, purely receive them, and there would be funding for those activities that they would undertake at your institution within the US or Canada. So.
While you're waiting for a more question, I always have a list of the most common questions prepared, because as UK Marie NCPs, we get specific questions, and we often get them a lot. So if you don't mind, if you don't mind me asking them. I know you mentioned this, Bronwyn, but we often get this question. In a Marie Curie Staff Exchange Consortium, does every participant have to second a staff member?
No, but you will either have to send or receive. So you do have to have some relationship to a secondee. I guess that would be the answer to that. But I think Jackson might have another question for us.
Yes, so I found the question submitted during registration. I don't know if the person asking has made it as a live attendee, but they ask, does the term consortia cover partnership agreements?
Should I pick this one up, Anne?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way that this gets very technical. So as a consortium of beneficiaries and associated partners, there will be kind of three types of documentation that will need to be set up if the project is successful. One is the grant agreement. So this is a legal document which is signed only by the beneficiaries and the Commission. Then to support that, you'll have what they call a consortium agreement. That will be an agreement developed by the consortia itself, which will cover some of the elements that are kind of in the grant agreement in more detail, but it will cover things like management, voting rights, intellectual property, who joint in severe liability, all those kind of nitty-gritty things that you need to have a successful collaboration and partnership. You can also have a separate partnership agreement. And the partnership agreement would be between the beneficiaries and the consortium as a whole and the individual associated partners. Under Horizon 2020, it was very common to have all three. So each beneficiary and associated partner that they had their agreement would have their own partnership agreement. And then you'd have the consortium agreement, and then you'd obviously have the grant agreement. So there are quite a lot of these agreements within a single RISE project. Under Horizon Europe, what we're seeing is a move towards including the associated partners in the consortium agreement itself with specific clauses related to them. It does simplify things. It keeps all the documentation and all those clauses in one place, and it makes sure that nothing gets lost. So hopefully that helps the person who's asked that question, if they're here. If they've got very specific questions on those kind of legal agreements, then that's something that we're very happy to help with. I'd also say that there's a dedicated IP help desk for European funded projects. They can also go through all those as well. But yes, we're seeing a move for the partnership agreement, the associated partners to be brought into the consortium agreement to simplify a lot of things. Otherwise, there's a lot of partnership agreements going around.
Thank you very much. I think what I'll do, Anne, I'll ask you if you want to go over for one or two more frequently asked questions, or however many you think will be useful to the audience. It sort of will live on in the record of the recording, but I'm not seeing any questions submitted. I think you've both done an incredible job going over some complex information. So please continue with whatever common questions you think will be useful, and I'll follow up to any of the answers you're giving now during the Q&A. I'll compile some of these and make them available on a document to complement the PDF presentations that you've given. So thank you.
Thank you. I've just posted the link to the IP help desk in the chat. So if that person is in the audience, then they can have a look at the link as well. So another question we get from third countries who would be willing to host researchers is, how will our expenses, the expenses of the researchers or activities, how will they be covered? What would you advise that we ask the other consortium members early on? How would you say we deal with the financial allocation of the budget?
Well, first of all, exactly that.
Yeah, but sorry. Okay.
In exactly that way. No, what we, as I mentioned in my presentation when I talked about the budget, it is very common and kind of expected that the costs that you would incur as a host will be covered by the funding provided by the EC for those. The mechanism and the amount really depends on what you and the other organization have agreed. If you've got a lot of expenses and it will take up the full amount of the research, training, and networking budget, then and then you would get the full amount. If it's a small amount, then you get a small amount. It really depends on your project and the project needs. And the same goes for the management and indirect costs so effectively what we call overhead. So you will have overhead costs by having a staff member, someone working in your lab. The amount really varies. So it's really important that you just ask, how much do you expect? How will this work out? As I mentioned, sometimes it could be a payment in advance. So they would say, okay, this is what we'd expect you to spend. We'll send it to you. If you spend less than that, we'll ask for some of it back or not. Though to be fair, they usually always ask for some back. Or they might say, okay, to make it a lot easier so we don't have to worry about how much has to transfer back and forth, we will pay on the basis of an invoice. They will come and spend, say, 2 months working in your laboratory or in your office. They will rack up a certain number of expenses that, following your normal internal procedures, you will then invoice the sending organization for that. It really, really varies. So yeah, simply just saying, how is the funding going to work? How much is it going to be available? Is really important. And then this is where you'll need to talk to your finance teams as to what type of the actual modality that is actually possible, because you don't want to assume it's one way and find out that your institution can't do it that way. So I will also just say it gets quite expensive quite quickly. If you're in a part of Canada or the US that is quite expensive to live, I would also let the sending organizations know this. I will also say, for those who might be getting their own funding and coming to the UK is very expensive. So I would encourage you to discuss with the hosts what options are there to help reduce those costs. So will there be on-site accommodation, for instance? Will they be able to get staff rates for conference facilities, or if that's what they need? So it's important to ask all those questions up front, because it can quickly rack up the cost of sending someone on secondment beyond just the cost of the flights. So
Well, thank you so much. I think I'll defer to you for any potential additional questions, but I also want to just maybe close my portion here and give final remarks to you as well. So I want to thank you both for the excellent presentations, and again, commit to the audience that we'll be making a lot of this available within the next 24 hours. So thank you so much. And again, I give the floor to you.
I just want to say, Jackson, I sent you an email with our PDFs. They're all ready to go for you. So.
Teamwork really does make the dream work. Okay. Like I said, Jackson, we have more questions, but we adhere to you because you are the one. So if you say,
well, you've been generous with your time, also considering the time zone difference since you're coming to us from Europe. So I think we can leave it here, and I will encourage people to reach out to us with questions. And then there is a wide network of Europe-based national contact points. If you have country-specific questions, or you just have a certain NCP that you've identified that you want to ask questions, I think they will provide you a lot of expertise. So thank you both for serving in that capacity as well. And now the pressure is on me since I have all the documents to get everything ready. So thank you again. I want to thank my colleague for being here, also in the background, making sure everything's running smoothly. And the chat has been a bit nice with everyone sharing greetings, and all the links that have been posted there and information, I'll be gathering those. So I'll close it off here. Thank you so much to everyone, and keep an eye on your inbox tomorrow for all the documents that I've been mentioning. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day, everybody. Bye.